Okay, in this video, I'll show you how to do a gram stain. So you'll need a slide and slide holder as I'm holding up. I'm using a clothespin, but it'll work essentially the same. And using a marker or a Sharpie, you can label the slide with the info about the sample. So as you can see, or as you will see, as I hold up the slide, I labeled it with the sample number and a G for gram stain, which indicates that the slide holds a gram stain of this sample. So next you can attach the slide holder to the slide and you can place a drop of water onto the slide. This will be used to disperse the bacteria for a gram stain. So just a drop, not too much water. Try not to overdo it with the water, which can be a problem in the staining process. And now we have our sample. We're going to transfer the bacteria from our TSA plate onto the slide. So to do this, we're going to need to use the flame, and for safety in the lab, make sure to wear safety goggles. You can see in the video that I've grabbed them and placed them and worn them. So turn on the gas to allow the Bunsen burner to be lit and light it with a striker as I have done, or you can use matches as well. And now using the flame, we're going to sterilize the inoculating loop, the metal inoculating loop. So flame the end of the inoculating loop that will interact with the sample until redness. This ensures that the loop is completely sterilized and will not contaminate the bacteria. And now I'm waiting for the loop to cool. If you use the loop while it is too hot, that can distort the bacterial sample, which will not show up well on our slide, on our stain. So just wait a minute or a few seconds for the inoculating loop to cool. And now that it has cooled, we can pick up some of the bacteria from the plate. So open the plate using the clamshell method. This is proper aseptic technique. And pick up a small portion of the bacterial sample. You only really need a very small amount. Taking too much can result in the bacteria looking very thick and clumped together on the stain, which is not ideal. So only take a small amount. And now that it's on the inoculating loop, disperse the bacteria in the water drop on the slide using the inoculating loop. So you can spread the water out over the slide to make it thin and even. This, a thin and even smear will have the best results for a gram stain. So try to get it as much thin and even as possible. It should be about the size of a quarter once you've spread it out. And now that we've done that, we can heat fix the slide. To do this, ideally before you heat fix, you would let the water dry completely, air dry completely. But if we don't have time for this, you may just go to heat fixing, as I've done. So using the slide holder, just pass the slide through the flame very slowly. Ideally, you want to do this very slowly and spend a lot of time between passes through the flame. Make sure the slide spends a lot of time outside of the flame, more than passing through the flame. This will result in the best stain because the slide won't be as rippled and the smear won't be as rippled. So ideally you want to get it as non-rippled as possible, especially when we haven't allowed the smear to air dry. As I have done, there's still water on the side, which makes it really easy to produce ripples. So as you can see, I've passed through the flame again. So just do it extremely slowly and more time outside the flame than inside. And as well, you can allow the water to evaporate if you haven't allowed for air dry. And you only really need to pass it through the flame 2 or 3 times. See, now my sample has completely dried and been heat fixed. And now we have finished the Bunsen burner portion. Next, and the heat fixing. Next, we can use the slide to actually perform the stain. So to perform the stain, we're at a sink or a washing bowl station. This is ideal because we're using solutions and water. This is probably the best environment for that, to avoid making a mess. And for 1 minute, we're going to start with the crystal violet. So just have a few drops of crystal violet and flood the smear with the crystal violet. Make sure to completely cover the smear and let it sit. So I would say hold it straight as well, like I'm doing, to avoid too much of the smear running off the slide. Just let the smear completely sit. Let too much of the stain run off the slide. Let the stain completely sit on the smear for a minute. And the purpose of this step is to allow the crystal violet to enter the cell wall and stain the bacteria. This crystal violet will stain both the gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. It will stain them purple. And it enters the cell wall, and that's why we can see the stain. So just let this sit and allow this process to develop. And the next step will be to use Graham's iodine. So that is coming up. So you can have that prepared on the side. And now as we're approaching the end of the time, we can wash the stain off, the crystal violet stain off, with water. So gently rinse the crystal violet stain off with water and try not to rinse directly on top of the smear. As you can see, I am rinsing slightly above the smear rather than directly on top. Rinsing directly on top risks washing off some of that bacteria, which we do not want to do. So try to rinse around the smear, get off any of that excess crystal violet as much as possible. And yeah, so I'm continuing to rinse off my slide. So now that I've done that, we may move on to Graham's iodine. Graham's iodine will sit on the slide for 30 seconds. So just take a few drops, flood the slide. Oh, shaking off some water. Flood the slide with the iodine and let it sit for 30 seconds. So this iodine will form a complex with the crystal violet, and it's a mordant solution, so it's a helper solution. It will kind of ensure the crystal violet stays in the cell wall. This is especially important for gram-positive bacteria, where the crystal violet does stay within the cell wall and underneath that thick layer of peptidoglycan. So yeah, the iodine forms like a complex with the crystal violet. This is essentially the main idea. And now that time is up, we will rinse off the Graham's iodine. Same as the crystal violet, just let it rinse off. And try not to wash directly on the stain. Like directly on the smear, I mean. And our next process is ethanol. So ethanol is the decolorizer. And you don't want to do this. You want to run the ethanol down the slide, keep it tilted like this. This will not sit on the slide. It will run down and keep it running until it runs clear. Like the liquid running off the slide is running clear. The point of the ethanol is to decolorize. So in gram-negative bacteria, it will dissolve the outer membrane, and this allows the crystal violet complex in gram-negative bacteria to escape. This is why gram-negative bacteria don't appear violet. Only gram-positive bacteria do. In gram-positive bacteria, there's no outer membrane to dissolve for ethanol, and the thick layer of peptidoglycan prevents the crystal violet from escaping. So the gram-positive bacteria will remain purple. So now immediately after the ethanol, you want to rinse with water to get off any excess ethanol. Letting the ethanol sit for too long can result in over-decolorizing and letting the crystal violet complex escape even the gram-positive bacteria. So as you can see, I immediately rinsed it off. And now our next step is with safranin. So this will be performed for 45 seconds. So just same thing as the previous flooding, just flood with the saffron, let it cover the smear, and let it sit. So the saffron is the counter stain. This will allow the gram-negative bacteria to show up under the microscope. Now that we've rinsed out the crystal violet, if the bacteria does end up being gram-negative, there will be no color to it. So saffron allows the reddish pinkish color that's characteristic of gram-negative bacteria to show up. In gram-positive bacteria, the saffron does stain, but the crystal violet overpowers that color, so the gram-positive bacteria will still show up purple. So let this sit. And as time is approaching to an end, we can rinse off the saffron in the same process, avoiding directly on the smear. Just rinse off as much of the stain as possible, as much of the excess stain. You can see it's running off. And now that that process is over, you can kind of try to dry it off and try to dry off the slide and view it. So now we can take off the slide holder and you can wipe off the back of the slide with no smear, but the front, considering there's a smear on it, you can't just wipe it off at risk of wiping off the bacteria. So in efforts to dry, you can either air dry it or gently blot the smear side with a paper towel. Try to avoid blotting directly on the smear. Just try to blot off the water with a paper towel and be as gentle as possible to avoid blotting off too much of the smear. So I've been blotting very carefully, as you can see, and checking each time to make sure I haven't blotted off too much of the smear. And let's see if I accept this one. And yep, it's completely dry and you can see the smear. You can see it looks a little pink. You can kind of tell this one will end up being gram-negative. You can use your microscope to view this slide. So just set up your microscope, start on scanning power, place the slide in, and start viewing. I'm adjusting the slide in position and adjusting my eyepieces, and you can go up to the oil lens. This will allow for the best viewing of the stain. Thank you for watching this. This is how you perform the proper gram stain procedure.